Altered Genes, Twisted Truth by Stephen Druker, public interest attorney and founder of the Alliance for Biointegrity, dives deep into the heart of one of the most controversial and misunderstood fields of modern science, genetic engineering, specifically as it applies to the food we eat every day. The book begins in the early 1980s, a time when the life sciences were on the brink of a revolution. Renowned biologist Ernst Mayr urged Philip Regal, a professor at the University of Minnesota, to take on a monumental task: challenge the way genetic engineering was being conducted, and to ensure that this powerful technology was used responsibly. Mayr warned Regal of the formidable forces he would be up against. The biotech industry, with its deep pockets and powerful allies in academia and government, would not take kindly to any attempts to scrutinize their work. "They will try to crush you," Mayr cautioned. But Regal, driven by a sense of duty and a commitment to scientific integrity, decided to take on the challenge. Regal's concerns were first sparked when he learned that genetic engineering practices were about to be fully deregulated. He was surprised, and frankly alarmed, that many of his colleagues were celebrating this news. Regal found it strange that genetic engineering was being treated as inherently safe, regardless of how it was applied. He believed that each product of genetic engineering should be evaluated on its own merits, considering the diverse ways in which it could affect living organisms and ecosystems. Regal's skepticism was met with resistance. When he suggested that students studying microbial engineering should also learn about ecology, biological adaptation, and population genetics, he was met with indignation. The proponents of genetic engineering argued that such knowledge was unnecessary because gene splicing was inherently safe, and that no additional understanding was needed beyond their narrow field of expertise. This insular attitude troubled Regal deeply. He couldn't understand how scientists could be so certain about the safety of radical modifications to complex biological organisms without understanding the full dynamics of how these organisms functioned within ecosystems. As Regal delved deeper into the issue, he discovered that the molecular biologists promoting genetic engineering were operating under a set of fundamentally flawed assumptions. They believed that the biosphere was so tightly integrated that there were no niches for genetically modified organisms, GMOs, to exploit. They argued that these organisms would inevitably be impaired by the modifications and could not compete with other organisms in the wild. But Regal knew this was not the case. He pointed out that organisms are not optimally adapted, but merely adequately adapted, and that there is often room for improvement. Genetic engineering could, in fact, bestow a competitive edge on an organism, enabling it to flourish in the wild and become a major pest. Despite the lack of evidence to support their claims, the molecular biologists continued to promote the idea that GMOs were safe. They shunned discussions with scientists who disagreed with them, even those with greater expertise in relevant areas of knowledge. Regal's concerns were not just about the environmental impact of GMOs, but also their potential health risks. He believed that genetic engineering could disrupt biochemical pathways in ways that could lead to the production of harmful substances. He stressed the need for rigorous testing to ensure the safety of these novel foods. But his warnings fell on deaf ears. The biotech industry and government regulators were more interested in promoting the technology than in ensuring its safety. They assured Regal and others that ample precautions would be taken, but in reality, they were more focused on getting products to market quickly and cheaply. As the pressure to deregulate genetic engineering mounted, Regal and other scientists who shared his concerns decided to push back with genuine science. They meticulously analyzed the arguments being used to support deregulation and found them to be disturbingly superficial and based on outdated notions about ecology and biological adaptation. For instance, They debunked the idea that genetic engineering was merely an extension of traditional breeding practices. While traditional breeding involves the combination of genes through sexual reproduction, genetic engineering combines genes in a radically different way. It allows for the transfer of genes between unrelated species, something that cannot occur naturally, and it does so without the natural checks and balances that traditional breeding provides. Moreover, the biotech industries claim that genetic engineering is more precise and predictable than traditional breeding was also called into question. Regal and his colleagues pointed out that the process of inserting genes into a foreign genome is inherently imprecise and can cause unintended disruptions. The inserted genes can disrupt the functioning of native genes, and the process itself can induce hundreds of mutations throughout the DNA molecule. Despite the mounting evidence against the safety of genetic engineering, the biotech industry continued to push its agenda forward. They employed a variety of tactics to downplay the risks and promote their products. One of the most insidious was the concept of substantial equivalence, which argued that genetically modified foods were essentially the same as their conventional counterparts, and therefore required no additional testing. This concept was widely adopted by regulators around the world, including in the United States, Canada, and the European Union. It allowed manufacturers to avoid rigorous safety testing and to market their products with little oversight. But as Regal and other scientists pointed out, the concept of substantial equivalence was scientifically unjustifiable and inconsistent with precautionary regulation. The flaws in the regulatory system were highlighted by several high-profile cases. For instance, the case of the Flavr Savr tomato, the first genetically engineered whole food to be approved for market, revealed the inadequacy of the testing that was being conducted. Despite evidence of potential health risks, including stomach lesions in rats, the FDA approved the tomato for sale, relying on flawed data and ignoring the concerns of its own scientists. Similarly, the case of the toxic tryptophan supplement, which caused a deadly epidemic in the United States in 1989, demonstrated the dangers of relying on inadequate testing and the willingness of regulators to cover up evidence of harm. The supplement, produced through genetic engineering, contained a toxic contaminant that was likely a byproduct of the engineering process. Yet, the FDA and other government agencies went to great lengths to downplay the role of genetic engineering and to blame other factors for the epidemic. The examples of Flavr Savr and tryptophan are chilling reminders of the risks associated with genetic engineering and the lengths to which the biotech industry and government regulators will go to protect their interests. It also underscores the importance of independent scientific research and the need for transparency in the regulatory process. Despite widespread opposition to genetic engineering, the question remains: why do so many scientists and scientific institutions continue to promote this technology? The answer, as we've seen, is complex. Some are motivated by financial gain, while others are driven by a genuine belief in the potential benefits of genetic engineering. But whatever the reason, the result is the same: a systematic distortion of the facts and a failure to acknowledge the risks. But there is hope. As more people become aware of the facts, the tide is beginning to turn. The public is demanding more transparency and accountability from the biotech industry and government regulators. And scientists who have been silenced for too long are finally speaking out. This has been a BrightLearn video from BrightLearn.ai on the book Altered Genes, Twisted Truth by Stephen Druker. Visit BrightLearn.ai for more fascinating videos like this one, and visit naturalnews.com for full editorial coverage and breaking news on critical stories that keep you informed and aware of what's really going on.